Uh, Welcome everyone to today's AI ethics seminar, and especially welcome to today's speaker, Jessica Nihlén Fahlquist from Uppsala University, who will speak on ethical aspects of AI in medical research. There's going to be a Q&A after the talk, so I encourage everyone who has questions during the talk, you can post them in the chat and we can then bring them up in the end during the Q&A. But without further ado, I hand over to you, Jessica. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to this seminar. I will talk from my background as my current job as an ethics advisor in an AI project at Uppsala University and Akademiska Hospital. And so it's my experiences from doing that. I also have a background in medical ethics as well as ethics of technology and ethics of risk. So it's a bit of a combination there. So first of all, when it comes to AI and ethics, the way I see it, and especially in the medical field, it's a combination of different sub areas of applied ethics. It's partly about research ethics because it's a research project in process, and it's medical ethics because it's in medical research and it's AI for healthcare. But it's also ethics of technology, which I think we're not really that good at in Sweden, but they do a lot of that in the Netherlands, primarily in Europe. So it's a mix of all these different areas, which makes it a bit challenging, but also interesting. So when it comes to medical ethics, this is a discipline that's well established in the medical doctors program and amongst medical doctors. It focuses on the doctor-patient relationship. And as I said, it's well established. It was developed primarily during the 20th century, mid-20th century, when it became clear that we need some rules, ethical and legal, in the medical field, in healthcare, and to protect patients. It's fairly institutionalized and formalized through law, but there are also recommendations and guidelines. And it's basically about rights and protecting individuals. And the foundation of medical ethics, that's quite solid, but it's also disputed. But I think all medical education programs start by using these principles or talking about these principles, and then you apply it to different cases throughout the education and also when you're practicing as a doctor. So the first principle is autonomy. And it's about self-determination based on the idea that we are all individuals who are capable to decide for ourselves what we want. And this is where informed consent, where that has its foundation, or the autonomy, the principle of autonomy entails the idea of informed consent, that nothing should be done against us. We always have the choice, for example, which treatment to begin, or which medication, or decisions that you have to make, medical decisions. So autonomy, the principle of autonomy, is very important. And then we have the principle of non-maleficence, which is about doing no harm and avoiding harm and minimizing harm. And the third principle is the principle of beneficence, so doing good. And the last principle is justice, which is about equal rights, but also about having a just prioritization of resources in healthcare. And so these four principles are not ordered but they say something that is important or point to an important aspect of healthcare. So these are the basic medical ethics principles. And when it comes to research ethics, and probably some of you are familiar with this, it's basically the same principles as in medical ethics that developed during the same period, for reasons that became obvious after the Second World War and other public health interventions that we had and policies in Europe. It's also about rights. It's about protecting individuals. We shouldn't sacrifice people, patients, research subjects for the collective good. And there are additions, of course, in research ethics, principles of confidentiality, data protection, conflict of interest, academic integrity, and so on. It's also institutionalized and formalized through law and ethics approval systems. In Sweden, we have the Ethical Review Authority. I don't know how many of you submit applications to that authority, but it's standard procedure in the medical field. And so I struggle sometimes with the interdisciplinary character of the project where I'm involved, and when I talk to other people in the medical field, because it's sometimes I feel like they think that ethics is about having your project approved by the authority. So the idea is sometimes that if it's approved by the Swedish Ethical Review Authority, then the research is ethically and legally acceptable and justifiable. So what I'm trying to communicate is that if it's legally accepted, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's ethically acceptable or socially accepted. So research approved by the Swedish Ethical Review Authority doesn't mean that the research is ethically unproblematic. And sometimes people in the medical field tick the boxes and get the decision, and then you're good to go, basically. And the same thing with research on AI in healthcare. If it's approved by the authority, doesn't mean that it's ethically unproblematic. Or accepted by medical staff, patients, society. And you need ethical normative analysis throughout the project for acceptability. And you need to ask the stakeholders how they feel about the whole new technology being introduced for societal acceptance and for acceptance by healthcare staff, etc. Which is why, I should have mentioned the project that I'm involved in. It's called Emerge AI, and it's about AI in the emergency department, and about having a probability being served to you when a patient comes to the emergency department about what kind of condition or diagnosis or what treatment is suggested, or blood tests and things like that, a decision support system. So and the ERC in this case has requested or required that there's an ethics advisor, and I know that they do this in some cases because it's going to be considered high risk when you introduce AI in a medical setting. So that's why you need the normative ethical analysis, and you need to ask the stakeholders for ethical reasons to get acceptability, justifiability, preferably, and also societal acceptance. That's my perspective anyway. So it's not just about medical ethics or research ethics. That's what I'm trying to communicate in my group. It's also about ethics of technology, which is a different field. And ethics of technology, there was increased interest during the last 20 or 30 years. I think, as a research area in philosophy and in ethics. The focus is it's on individuals, but it's also on society and environment. So it's a bigger perspective, if you will. It's not as widespread or well known as medical ethics, and especially I think in Sweden and some other countries, whereas in some countries it is well known. And I know in Sweden it's taught at some universities and some degree programs, but it's not to the same extent as medical ethics in medical degree programs. And there are no well-established principles, but there are theories, approaches, and methods. But no, you can't talk about like 4 principles that everyone agrees on, as in medical ethics or research ethics. But the basic idea is that ethical analysis is needed before technologies are introduced in large scale in society. So whereas we used to and still do discuss technologies when they're out there, when they're already out there in society. We discuss whether it's good or bad or what the ethical aspects are. But here the idea is that you have to do that before, or should do that before the technologies are introduced in society. Ethics of technology is not to the same extent or at all institutionalized or formalized. There's no ethical review authority for introducing technology in society, as it is when you want to try a new pharmaceutical or treatment, where you have clinical trials, etc. So in ethics of technology, and maybe some of you know these concepts, but there are theories and methods and approaches, as I said, although there are no well-established principles. So there's the idea of value-sensitive design, for instance. There's a theory or approach about responsible social experiments, which is, I think, an interesting idea. Because the researchers compare introducing new technology in society with medical treatments and the clinical trials that are used in order to decide whether a treatment is good or bad. So the idea is that when you introduce a new technology in society, say nuclear energy before, maybe. It's like you experiment in society without having the lab environment before you introduce it. You introduce the technology and more or less see what happens. So we might need to do that because we need new technologies. It has to be done in a responsible way, and they discuss certain conditions that should be used. There's also ethical parallel research, where the idea is that ethicists do research at the same time, parallel to the research project. And there's the quite recent approach or method, and also research program about ethics of socially disruptive technologies. But the underlying idea in all of these approaches is that technology is not value neutral or deterministic. We're used to thinking of, or at least if you talk to engineers, not all, and probably not if there are engineers here today, but many engineers and many people in general would say that technology is value neutral. It just happens, and technology is what it is. And then how you use it, maybe that could be something to be discussed. But technology in itself is value neutral and it's deterministic. So it just happens the way it happens. Whereas in ethics of technology, the basic idea is that no, there are decisions to be made at certain points in time, and people can actually influence the development. So this is the basic idea, and I'm sure some of you know this, but it's absolutely not as established as medical ethics in all places. So AI ethics, I think there's a really interesting discussion about the role of principles, or we talk a lot about principles in AI ethics and AI legislation as it happens now. The principles of trustworthy and responsible AI are discussed. There are a lot of documents out there where it's talked about human agency, privacy, transparency, accountability, fairness, and all of these principles that are basically the same in all these different documents. So principles of trustworthy and responsible AI. One interesting question, I think, is whether we can actually include and apply these principles in the context of AI in medical research. I think one really interesting example is the principle of fairness and non-discrimination that is usually referred to in one way or another. So fairness in the context of AI and healthcare. And as you know, the discussion is about discrimination, potential bias, which is relevant to all AI applications. But in the medical context, it could very much affect people's lives and health, which is why the EU AI Act will consider healthcare applications as high risk compared to other applications that could be medium or low risk. Healthcare will be high risk. And an AI model could potentially, at the same time, have a positive effect on the health of the majority, so the health of the population, let's say, and at the same time have no effect or even a negative effect on the healthcare of on the health of some minorities because they were not in the training data. I'm trying to, yes. So I don't know how familiar you are with the ethical theories, but you may have heard of utilitarianism, which is about maximizing utility. And it fits very much the way we make decisions in society and the way we prioritize. It's about maximizing utility. So it's a consequentialist way of thinking. So if you have the utilitarian perspective, it's not necessarily a fairness problem if you maximize the health of the population, but not for certain minorities. So,
Jessica,
yes,
I'm no longer seeing your slides. Is
you're
that
not.
just me or?
Oh, sorry.
Same for me.
Same for you. Let's see
Yeah.
if we fix this.
I see a little bar with something called VR Etik Arena, blah, 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 2004.
Let's see. Do you see it now? No.
I see just the bar.
Do you see
Oh,
it?
now it's back.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
You never know how these things work. So where was I? So from a utilitarian perspective, it's not a problem if you maximize the health of the population, but if there are some minorities or individuals where health is not affected or even maybe negative, that would be a cost that you may have to accept if the benefit for the majority is that big. But I think an important distinction in this context is the one between negative and positive obligations. If you see non-discrimination and reduction of bias as the definition of fairness, that would be a negative obligation, essentially. It's refraining from discrimination. So the basic idea would be that if you don't discriminate, if you refrain from discrimination or discriminating people, you're basically not doing anything because you're not discriminating. If fairness, on the other hand, is seen as a positive obligation, it's about achieving a goal, for instance, equality in healthcare or equal capabilities to access to healthcare resources. So fairness can be seen in many different ways. And one of the things that I think we struggle with interdisciplinary is what definition should be used, or what perspective, what view of fairness, because it's not a given. And I think this is something that we need to discuss. What are we actually looking for when we talk about fairness? So fairness regarding what? Is it fairness to health outcomes? It could be fairness in relation to access to healthcare. It could be fairness in terms of right to health, or a capability to make use of that right to health. Because just because someone said you have a right, you may not know how to make use of that right. So there's an equality problem there. Or is it in relation to the maximization of the health of the population? So what are we striving for when it comes to fairness and AI in the medical context? It's not, we have to decide. It could also simply, which is what I've heard sometimes, it's what the law requires and nothing more. But as an ethicist, you want to do more than just what the law requires. Also, if you talk to lawyers, they will say that the law is not straightforward always. There's a hierarchy, and you have to look at several different laws, and the law changes, it develops. So I think it's important, and what I'm trying to communicate is that we need to clarify the meaning of fairness in the research phase, which requires that we have this interdisciplinary communication and collaboration, although it's very challenging, but it's needed. So I think, and it's not just me thinking, other researchers say the same thing, that we early on have to discuss and clarify what the implicit values are, and what the desirable values are. And we have to identify the stakeholders, because that's not always a given either. Who is actually a stakeholder? So we need to decide how we view these different things, and what are our implicit values? Are we taking things for granted? Do we have assumptions? So one example, when we talk about AI and fairness in the medical context, it could be that fairness is implicitly defined in terms of just reduction and mitigation of bias. But the question should be asked, could and should fairness be discussed or defined in a different way? And as I mentioned, who is a stakeholder? Is it hospital staff who will use this? Are patients stakeholders? That's not a given. We have different views on that. Are relatives stakeholders? The public? And also, when and how should stakeholders be consulted? And we're currently doing interviews, or a PhD student is doing interviews with healthcare staff about this. And this is sort of parallel to the actual development of the AI. So it's really interesting to hear what they have to say about AI, if it were to be introduced at the emergency department and other places as well. So, and I think one interesting issue that has come to the fore is that this particular AI, and I guess all AIs are well, they make use of the databases that we have when it comes to medical situations, medical healthcare appointments and stays at the hospital, and mortality, and these kinds of databases. And that data is based on certain predefined groups. In this case, it would be biological sex, for instance, and chronological age. And we don't have that many variables. So the question, of course, is which groups are included and excluded. And in Sweden, as you probably all know, we don't ask people what their ethnicity is or race, as they would say in the US. Gender identity and sexual identity in Sweden, it's not legal and it's not practiced to use those group identities, whereas in the US, for instance, they want to use that and they do use that for reasons of fairness. So there are arguments to exclude those categories because it could be misused, for instance, and it may not be scientifically accurate a lot of the times. But there are also good arguments to include them if it could improve health. And there are some studies about differences in health between different ethnicities, etc. And there could be important aspects related to that. And there's also this epistemic problem. We can't really know now in the research phase which groups will be considered important in the future. If, for instance, gender identity, sexual identity will be something that actually affects health. We don't know that and we don't have the data. So yeah, is it discrimination to include such groups or to exclude them, provided that we had that information, which we don't. So it's not even, we don't even know exactly what we mean by discrimination. And also fairness in relation to whom? So fairness in relation to patients, but possibly also fairness in relation to healthcare staff. There's a discussion, for instance, whether doctors and nurses should be able to choose whether to use AI or not. Is it in relation to future generations as well? Should we use data on environmental impacts when we do this kind of research and develop AI for healthcare? So you also have to think about the difference between top-down and bottom-up approaches. So I think this principle-based approach is a top-down approach. We have principles and we apply them. But as some researchers mention, ethics is not just about a set of principles. So it shouldn't be the end of ethics where ethics stop. If you have these principles and you apply them, then that's ethical. You have to, or should, I should say, use a bottom-up approach also. You have to be in the research project from the beginning and see what ethical aspects are important. It may not be just about the principles, or the principles may not help us all the way. And Reseguier and Rodriguez has described it as ethics is about navigating the murky and risky waters. So you need to be watchful. So it's not just about doing ethics and then you're done. So I think this is especially the case in the research phase, where there's a lot of uncertainty and lack of knowledge. So I think it was interesting to me. I wanted to ask ask ChatGPT what it would have to say about medical AI. I'll show you in a second, but. So what I think is that AI in medical research requires different kinds of approaches. You need the principles, but you also need the bottom-up ethics of technology approaches as well. Interdisciplinary communication, I talked about that. And try to be creative. You have to have the ethical analysis early on, which we're not really used to. And there are some researchers here who actually saw some hope in algorithms that they force us to be explicit about what we want to achieve with decision making. So, for instance, it forces us to define or at least describe what we mean by fairness, which we may not be used to in other situations or contexts. So I asked I asked ChatGPT what's for an image of hope, AI, and healthcare, because I want to believe that it is possible to be constructive, and this is what it gave me, which I really don't see as very hopeful, but I thought it was interesting. I should stop there. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Let's try an virtual applaud before we move on to the discussion.
Thank you.
Let's see what we have in the chat. We had first a question from Hamad. Hamad, do you want to grab the microphone and start the discussion?
Yes, thank you very much. Quite interesting, actually, a topic you brought in today. Actually, do you think that, I think Jessica just right now was talking about ethics and whether there would be practical, let's say, as she said, that for example, even as a patient or even as a human, let's say, like different countries tend to take different metrics, let's say, either ethnicity or even ethnicities or even genders and that sort of thing in different countries is different, right? Okay. But the thing is that, can I ask then how then you think that we should make it, or even healthcare professionals to actually should take the accurate determination? I'm sure that it's not really as straightforward as we might like to, but how do you think this? We might have to use the most accurate metrics as we would, if you understand what I mean.
No, would you mind just summarizing the question?
Okay, so basically what I was asking that, in the beginning you were talking just about 2 minutes ago, you were talking about that different countries tend to use different metrics to classify different or even categorize different people, let's say, in different countries, right? Okay. To, for example, so different companies tend to use, let's say, gender for classifications, okay, or even for genders in certain places and other metrics like these, basically. That's basically I would say. But also, I think towards the end, I think you also said that yes, those can be quite useful, but in some cases they can't sometimes. That's basically I'm trying to clarify that. So you think that, so my main question I would say is that, do you think then how is it that we should actually do a determination as such that, we should make an accurate determination where even these metrics can be sometimes useful or sometimes can't be useful? This tends to become a little bit nuanced, if you don't understand.
Yeah, so the problem is that we don't know now
No.
what will be considered important. And we don't have that data right now. And as you said, different countries have different categories. So yeah, that's a problem. And I'm not saying that it is or it isn't important to have distinction between different ethnicities. I know that they do it differently in different countries. And I know there are studies showing certain that different ethnicities would be relevant to health. But I also know a lot of researchers say that it doesn't. So it's really a challenge, I think.
And that, I think I totally agree with that. And okay, thank you for that, actually. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. We can move on. Wilhelm?
Hi, Jessica. Thank you very much for a good, broad introduction. And I like that you brought up that there are different perspectives on this. You mentioned at least 3, where you had biomedical ethics, and then you moved on to research ethics. and then ethics of technology. So, I mean, I'm curious about whether any of these particular perspectives tend to emerge more among AI practitioners. And my question is whether these perspectives tend to agree or tend to disagree in any particular areas that you see in your work. I mean, do they tend to overlap strongly when it comes to some particular kind of experiments or some things in clinical practice paired with technology? Or are there areas where there are strong disagreements?
I think the problem is that these different areas don't really talk. And I think that's what's interesting about AI and technology and medicine, that you have people coming from the medical field and they're really used to medical ethics and law. They also know research ethics in the sense that they know they have to apply for a decision. And the computer scientists involved in this project or engineers, also biostatisticians, they're not really used to ethics at all, I think, although they're interested, but they don't really have the same ethics education or ethics background. So I think this is really a challenge to say that it's about medical ethics and research ethics, but also about ethics of technology. And I think people who do ethics of technology, primarily in the Netherlands, that's the context that I know, they do ethics of technology, and usually it's well, it could be AI, but it could also be like nuclear energy or that kind of thing. They don't really do medical ethics, but there are attempts to use medical ethics principlism, as we call it, and apply it to technology, I think. But it doesn't really, it's not enough to cover. Also, the medical ethics field is about the individual patient. So the question of individual autonomy is not as easily applied to technologies, although it is. But I think it's really. I think we need to do more in order to sort of see how these could work together, I think. But that's a very good question.
I mean, just a follow-up question there. It's that, I mean, in your presentation, I think you mentioned several times that it's important. It can be important to think about ethics from the start in a technology, or I mean, in a healthcare research project. And I also happen to see that you're from Uppsala, so I mean, you are in a broad university where you have both medical research, you have a lot of technology, a lot of natural science, but also various fields. So, I mean, have you seen anything in your university about how you can get these perspectives into the thinking and planning at an early stage? Do you have any experiences that you can share?
No, unfortunately, I don't actually.
Yeah, because universities, they tend to be big and moving very slowly, and it takes time to adapt. So
Yes, they're separated. So I think it should be probably coming more and more with the EU requiring the ethical analysis from start, which is actually, I think, inspired or even designed by some of the ethics of technology researchers from the Netherlands who are more used to. They have more also government money invested in ethics of technology that I don't really think we have a lot of in Sweden. So it's a different context. So I hope it will be, but I mean, it even took me a while in this. I think I've been an ethics advisor for 2.5 years or something like that. And it took me some time to realize that all of these areas are actually relevant in the same project. Because you either have your medical ethics hat or your ethics of technology hat. But I would love to see that, see that more. But I don't know any early stage development other projects. if there are any, I would love to talk to them.
When you bring up that money aspect with the Netherlands and the government money, it makes me think that perhaps money and resources that are dedicated to thinking about such parts of a project could be important as part of a grant applications, for instance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if there are calls for that, which I think they've had that in the Netherlands, I know. And I did my PhD at KTH, and they have a small, it was bigger than ethics department. I think in the Netherlands they have 4 technical universities collaborating on ethics and philosophy of technology, ethics of technology. So you have a lot of, and we have like some ethics of technology there and maybe a little here, but we don't have it like it's not ingrained in the system and in the research and education.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting and impressive that KTH has such a division.
Very
Or
small.
yeah.
Very small.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great
We have
question.
one more question in the chat. Otieno, would you like to grab the microphone?
Good. How are you?
Hi.
I was asking if are there algorithms used in AI ethics?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The use of algorithms in AI ethics?
Yeah, I was asking, are there algorithms that can be used in AI ethics?
I know there are some attempts at having fairness metrics, different ways of incorporating fairness aspects in the development of algorithms. I don't know if any of you know more about that. But I know there are such attempts to include some kind of metrics for fairness. Different versions, but I guess all of them requires a definition of fairness. And I think you know more than me, but you have to sort of balance it with precision, I think.
Yeah. I think we can move on to the next question from Hamad again.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So my main question was that, in terms of AI ethics, the thing that I'm sure you can only talk about or even know about ethics in, let's say, in Sweden or surrounding countries, basically, which you're studying. But otherwise, generally, if you look internationally or otherwise, do you think that currently governments are starting to basically educate their populace or populations, or even their own medical sides and medical institutions in terms of ethics, in terms of AI systems at all? Because because I'm sure you understand that at the end of the day, and as AI is progressing so quickly now, at quite great speed, that in the end, I think the general population really needs to start to get themselves aware and start to get themselves at least more informed in terms of ethics in medicine, in medical ethics. Otherwise,
Absolutely. I think, do you think the governments know? I mean, the politicians, do you think that I'm a bit pessimistic about how much the government knows about AI ethics, and especially in healthcare and some of these contexts. I don't know if the governments know enough to educate the people. if you will. And also with the speed, I mean, a lot of tech people criticize the EU, for instance, for having this AI Act and having some kind of attempt at a legislation where the US and China don't have that. So they're worried that we will not be as advanced in our development of AI. So yeah. It would be great if there was some education. I think a lot of people don't know enough, but I don't think the governments know enough either. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Probably the role of the government should be to support the initiatives in medical ethics education.
Yes, but I think there is a lot of medical ethics already, but there's not a lot of ethics of medical technology, if you will. We're trying in Uppsala and Örebro. We had some WASP Ed money to introduce AI or AI courses or modules in the medical programs, but that's ongoing, so it's not even introduced yet. So that would be about AI and ethics. Ethics and law would be part of that, but it's also generally AI because these medical students will have to deal with AI when they're done. But that's just that part of society. The rest of society, I really don't. But partly it's probably our responsibility as researchers to talk about this. But also some of it is very complicated. So it's it requires quite an effort. Do you agree or not?
No, I think I definitely do agree with that. Basically, that as you know, that basically we as a humanity have not come across anything such like a hugely changing dynamic as basically AI systems ever in our lifetimes. Okay, and I mean, I'm old enough to understand or even go through several technological transformations. Let's say, even for example, when we used to use feature phones, those 2510 big phones, yes,
Yeah.
and basically then on and on, and then you go on from there from the 80s, and basically, I mean, AI systems in terms of everything is really transformational. I think that's the thing that currently everything is just not everything. I mean, everyone is just like swimming in the sea right now, just trying to hold out to a life raft of sort. If that's an example I can give.
Yes, I really agree. But some people think that in the healthcare setting, this is just another technology. It's like radiation or blood tests or whatever. It's just another technology. But I think that it's very different, as you say. Also about explainability. I mean, how will doctors be able? So they will have responsibility to explain to the patient. And I don't know how that will happen and how they can be accountable for what happens. It's confusing. I agree. It's a very new situation for humanity.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with that, basically. Because me as a technologist by background, I do understand it. But obviously, as for a layperson, okay,
Yes.
just as a layperson, let's say, for example, off the street or anything like that, okay, if you say to them, okay, Mr. So or whatever the case, and then you need to get a blood test done. For them to do or get a blood test done is really simple. It's really basic, isn't it? Yes, because most probably they have had that blood test done for the past, let's say 30, 40 years even. Okay, but the thing is, to them, it's just simply you just go in, okay, to your medical center, yes, and and then the more or less one of the nurses tends to draw the blood, and that's it. So in essence, I mean that's the thing, isn't it? That in essence, what is basically happening, that person himself, not, I mean, obviously not because of his own of the person's fault, but he's basically really left out. Not, I mean, not deliberately, but he's more or less really isolated from the system behind, basically, from the entire AI, medical AI systems. If I mean, for example, ethics side of things. Basically, if you understand what I'm getting at, basically.
Yeah, it would be very complicated for people in general, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question concerning, you talked about ethics in the emergency room. And in general, in AI for decision making, there's a lot of talk about the human in the loop ideal. You don't let AI make the decisions, but only inform decisions. And one class of applications where this ideal is put under pressure are the time critical applications. Extreme cases are high frequency trading on the stock market or military drone application, where it's a great pressure to hand over the decisions to the AI for various efficiency reasons. I can imagine that the emergency room is a place where you also have sometimes very time critical decisions. Do you foresee problems there with maintaining humans in the loop?
Yes, I really do. And I mean, the point of the whole thing is to increase cost effectiveness and kind of flow. So I think that is a real challenge. I mean, it is emphasized that there should be human in the loop and that is just a decision support system. But I guess there's a risk of a slippery slope as well. That the more you use it, the more you trust it, and then so I think it's hard to keep it maybe, or it's a challenge to keep it as just a decision making tool. Also, I don't know if because some categories are excluded from the training sets. If you have a patient who may not be in the training or who is not represented in the training data, I don't know if the doctors are supposed to just memorize who was in the data sets or go look at in a document to remind themselves. I don't really know how that, also with the time being critical, I don't really know how that's going to work. So yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think it's a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially the slippery slope aspect to this. Yes. Otieno had another question.
Yes. I was asking about something like human-inspired AI, whereby when developing an AI, let's say you also consider how it will affect others. So you put it at a given level that when developed at this point, you should not do that job beyond that point. Let's say if it is like helping a doctor to do a given task. Once it does that task, it reaches a given level and stops, leaves the remaining task for the doctor. Can that work?
So it would help the doctor to do some things, and it would. Is that what you? Because I think yes. I mean, there are positive aspects, and I think there is a potential to do good and to help doctors, absolutely. And I think that's why it's being. But I think the problem is that it's going so fast that we don't just want more and new technologies fast. We want it to be well deliberated and good, and I think that's the challenge. But of course, yes, there are potential benefits as well. It could. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm not sure I heard everything.
We have a few more minutes if there are further questions. I had actually one more question, Jessica, because when you introduced biomedical ethics in the beginning of the talk, there was something that sounded a little bit like a contradiction, but I'm sure you can clarify, because you talked about 4 principles that everyone agrees upon. And also you said that this area was disputed.
Yes. No, it's that's a very short summary of me. So I should say that everyone who is doing research or teaching medical ethics do talk about these principles, but not everyone agrees that it says everything that's important about medical ethics. So for instance, there's a lot of discussion about autonomy and how free are we as individuals, since we're all, we have relations and we have structural aspects, etc. So, but the idea of the principles, and it's new editions coming out all the time. It's two authors called Beauchamp and Childress. And so they try to see what would be the principles that we could all agree on, regardless of the ethical theory that we have. So utilitarianism or rights-based deontological ethics. So we could all agree, they said, on these principles, although we would have perhaps different arguments for why autonomy is important. We could all agree that it is important in the medical context. But there's a lot of discussion and there's critique. So that's what I meant. But even if you're against it, you sort of relate to it and you have to talk about it. That's what I meant.
Okay, that's clear.
Sorry about the confusion.
Yes. One final question from Hamad, if you can make it short.
Oh, yes, right. Yes. The thing is that my main question was that in terms of, we were just talking about in terms of using AI systems in A&E or accident and emergency scenarios. Okay. I'm sure, as you know, that especially the pressure on medical personnel at that time is extreme, obviously. But I would probably say, do you think that instead of burning the physicians, okay, so that they've got to basically memorize, and as you know that human memory tends to be a little bit it can be a little bit sometimes fleeting, if I would use that term for general memory, and to use AI systems just as an assistant for the physician. Say, okay, and just maybe as such as somewhat a reminder. Say, okay, maybe if the physician thinks that, okay, I need to go and come back to this patient, to the previous patient, let's say, after half an hour for any sort of medications or any sort of other procedures. So in that respect, do you think that in terms of AI side, as an AI system in really high pressurized situations as accident and emergencies would be much easier and would be much more prudent as an assistant wise?
Yes, I think it could be help, but I think the challenge is, as Ole also was that we were talking about, is a slippery slope. But I think if you have it as an assistant, this is also what the doctors that we interviewed sort of emphasized, that it could be good as a decision tool, but a medical doctor still has to be responsible, like we are now, they said. So I think if we can just keep it as a tool, then there are a lot of benefits. But we also need to keep reflecting, I think.
I think that's a very good final word here. Time is up. I hereby declare this session